Well, this weekend, India crossed a line it had never crossed before. Skyroot Aerospace's Vikram-1 lifted off from Sriharikota and placed itself into orbit, the first privately built Indian rocket to ever do so. It puts India in a club of just 3 nations with private orbital launch capacity or capability alongside the US and China. For a sector opened up to private players only 6 years ago, this is the proof of concept the industry has been waiting for. And joining me now is the man at the center of that opening up, Dr. Pavan Goenka, Chairman of InSpace. Dr. Goenka, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for your time today. And it must feel hugely rewarding, the big one, Vikram-1, reaching orbit this weekend. Walk us through what this moment really means for India's space sector.
Well, thank you, Ayesha, for having me on this show. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Clearly, what happened on Saturday is a milestone that, frankly, exceeds all our expectations. We went into this launch knowing full well that it's a very important launch for the Indian private sector and for Indian space sector overall, not just for the private space sector. But I think what turned out was even bigger than what we thought, in the sense that, frankly, we didn't expect the launch to be so flawless in the very first attempt. And what really made me feel so good that, other than the initial hiccup of it going on hold for a while, but once it restarted, it was absolutely flawless, completing all the mission objectives and beyond. And that's what makes it very special, that it was not just a launch, not just a successful launch, it was a perfect launch. And first time ever that a private sector has been able to succeed like this in the first attempt. So I think it's a very big milestone that Skyroot has created that day.
Dr. Goenka, this also makes India only the 3rd country with private orbital launch capability after US and China. Does that change how the world looks at India as a space player now?
Well, certainly, look, India was always looked at very positively when it came to space. ISRO over 6 decades has done a great job in technology, in missions, in everything related to space. But what the world will see now is that India is a place to look to for commercial activities in space. The whole ecosystem that we are creating with the launch of Skyroot and a couple of other companies that are right behind Skyroot, the launch center that we're creating in Kulsakapatnam, the various infrastructure coming up for making satellites, both in private sector and in space in terms of technical center that we have, and ISRO, of course. All of that together will definitely catch attention of people around the world to look to India to, at least in the small satellites, to look to India to meet all the requirements of designing, making, launching, and even getting data out of those satellites. So I think world will look differently at the Indian private sector. And I think we've been talking about this for last 4 years, since the time the reforms were announced and the time InSpace was announced. But this is the first sort of tangible proof, a very strong tangible proof that the private sector has arrived.
Absolutely. And, you at InSpace, InSpace was set up to be the bridge between ISRO and the private industry, right? How much of Vikram-1's success do you credit to that public-private hand-holding, the motor casting, the testing facilities, the range access?
So let me first say that nothing should take away from the work done by the young team at Skyroot. The sweat that they have raised over the last 4 or 5 years, sleepless nights that they would have had, nothing should take away from that. Having said that, I would think that the enabling activities of the Government of India through ISRO, through InSpace, have played a meaningful role in making that happen. Starting from all the authorizations, all the approvals, all the licensing, and there are many of those that are done. The insurance, the calculation of what needs to be insured, all of that. But I think the most important contribution other than the fact that the launch happened on the ISRO premises, where all of SHAR leadership team and the experts were fully involved in this launch, just like they'll be involved in any ISRO launch. The more important thing, I think, the most important, was the review. The review rigor that we were able to bring into this launch was of the same level, maybe even more, than what we would have done for a ISRO rocket. And that review, I think we have had about 25 reviews over the 2 years on mission readiness, on launch readiness, and technical reviews, and so on. And every step of the way, we find something that Skyroot needs to do, and then go back and do it, they come back. And I think that rigor is something that has contributed heavily in the success of flawless launch that happened first time. And that's something that I feel very good about in both sense, in the way that we were able to conduct the reviews, the way we were able to get experts from ISRO, current and past, and the way the company responded to all the expectations that the reviewers had on what needs to be taken care of before we can go to the next step. And our chairman of the review committees was Dr. B.N. Suresh, very well-known, well-respected ex-ISRO scientist. And he was very clear that this is the first launch, first private sector launch. And this launch will do a lot to either bring confidence or lose confidence in what the private sector can do. And therefore, he was very, very adamant about making sure that we do not cut any corners and do everything right. So I think that was a very valuable contribution made by ISRO and in space, and something that hopefully help private sector learn in general on what kind of rigor is necessary in making successful launches. Successful satellites even to do. And frankly, we will perhaps bring in more of that in other aspects of the space sector, such as right now we are not reviewing satellites. We are leaving it to the companies to do it right, but perhaps in future we will start reviewing satellites also to ensure that the design is done properly and all the things have been taken care of.
So does a private success like this also take some pressure off the state system, or does it raise uncomfortable questions about it?
Well, I don't think we should look at it as pressure off or pressure on. There are two different activities that are happening. The PSLV 2 failures were very unfortunate that it happened back to back. ISRO has done a very rigorous review of what needs to be changed, and they have come to a very confident conclusion on what needs to be done for future launches, and pretty soon ISRO will be back on track in terms of launches. I think whole of ISRO is very happy to see that this is successful in a way it is, and not only very happy, and as you can see, that they have made a big contribution in terms of opening up everything for Skyroot to use, and you saw in the Mission Control Center. All the people were from ISRO except for the first row, which was from Skyroot, who were helping to make the launch successful. So there is no, it's not like a pressure coming in. But it does bring in the fact that we have a private sector, we have a parallel activity to ISRO that is now taking roots. And with time, in fact, the way I look at it is that with time, it's a pressure off of ISRO, because ISRO does not have to cater to all day-to-day routine requirements of the space sector in India, while ISRO can focus on the more complex job of launching scientific missions, orbital missions, R&D kind of things, looking at future technologies for, let's say, returnable launch vehicle, heavier vehicles, and they can leave all this day-to-day routine activity to private sector to conduct. And that confidence will grow, not from one launch, but perhaps 2 or 3 successful launches happening will bring that confidence in.
That's exactly what I was trying to understand. But Dr. Goenka, the government is now talking about a $9 billion domestic space economy, right? With an ambition of $44 billion within a decade's time. Is that number realistic? And what needs to happen for us to get there?
Okay, that number is very aspirational. To go to $44 billion from $8-9 billion in a 8-9 year time frame is a very aggressive target. It's a target that has been defined actually by Aerospace, which has been accepted now by all parts of the government. And that's what we are working towards. And so it's not a number pulled out of thin air. It's something that is based on what we think can happen in various parts of the space sector. If you look at the whole overall space economy, it is about $440 billion right now. That means we are less than 2% of that economy. We have a fairly large domestic demand for space, various things to do with the space, including what goes into strategic sector, that is the Indian military forces. And we have a potential of doing a lot of things for customers outside India. So the main thing that we have to keep in mind that so far, before space reforms happened, our thrust has been only on the scientific experiments, orbital missions, and meeting the requirements of various government departments within India. That's been the primary focus, right? Now the focus is going on in how do we convert all of that to an economic value. Do all of that, very important, but also create economic value. And I think it can happen. It's not easy. It's not something that's given to you, but it's not impossible either. So we'll have to work very hard at it. We'll have to work together, all the stakeholders. But the government of India is fully committed to it. As you can see that even the Honorable Prime Minister came online to congratulate the Skyroot team, and all the ministers were as excited as all of us were about what has happened. So the commitment is there. There's a lot of work happening right now. I think the biggest question that will be asked is that while we can create the launch vehicles, while we can launch the satellites, while we can do this and that, that's the supply side. Where is the demand? Will we get $44 billion worth of demand? That's the big question that one will ask. And I cannot talk in detail, but there's a lot of work happening right now within the government on how do we leverage space more. There's a lot that is being done. Okay, but I would say that's only about 10%, 15, 20% of what space can do for us. And all government departments now are very committed to leverage space as much as it can be. And especially in the armed forces, you would know that in the way things have evolved in the last couple of years globally, means that the armed forces will also have to look at space in a much bigger way. Right? You have seen an announcement by a large Indian conglomerate on launching a LEO constellation. If that comes in, that's multiple $1 billion of investment and of revenue that will come just from that one project. So if you add it all up, there certainly is potential for India to get to $44 billion. But we'll have to keep the foot on the pedal and look at all parts of the value creation that will add up to that number: communication, navigation, applications, data dissemination. All of these things have to come together to get to $44 billion. But that's one of our prime single number that we keep in the front of us. That's where we have to get by 2033.
Skyroot has become India's first space unicorn, right, earlier this year. Are we going to see more billion-dollar space startups, or is Skyroot for now an outlier?
No, certainly Skyroot is not an outlier. We will see multiple unicorns coming in. In fact, our Honorable Prime Minister on the Space Day last year, in August 23rd, has given us a target to have 5 unicorns by 2030. We have Skyroot that crossed $1 billion even before this launch. Keep in mind that even before this launch, we have, I think right now, 4 companies that their last valuation was between quarter billion to 350,000 million. So they are all right up there. And I've always said that what we need to see are a couple of successes. And once we have a couple of successes, we are going to see a horde of activity happening. Just from Saturday till today, there have been so many calls that we have received from investors, because we keep very close contact with all the investors, on questions about this, about that, about that, about that. Everybody wants to now write a check. That doesn't mean that the check will be written easily. There'll be a lot of questions. But I do believe that we have at least 5 companies that I can think of today that by 2030 for sure, and maybe before then, will become unicorns. If you ask me to name them, I cannot. But there are at least 4 or 5 companies that I have full confidence that will become unicorn.
So tell me, who in the private pipeline is closest to their own orbital milestone? Let me twist that question.
On orbital?
Milestone.
What do you mean by that? I'm sorry, I don't follow that.
No, I just wanted to understand, beyond Skyroot, who else in the private pipeline, Agnikul or any other, is closest to becoming perhaps, a bigger company than what they currently are, or perhaps achieve what, a Skyroot has achieved?
Yeah. So in terms of private companies, the one that is closest is Agnikul in terms of launch vehicle. They had done a suborbital launch about mid-24. They're about 1 year behind Skyroot in terms of timeline. And they are from IIT Madras, set up in the IIT Madras Research Park. And they are bringing out a rocket that would be similar in terms of what it can do, but very different in technology compared to what Skyroot has. In fact, what they are working on is a reusable rocket from the word go. While Skyroot has also talked about the next phase being reusable, Agnikul is working on reusable from the word go. So if they do succeed in reusable rocket, that will be first in India for somebody to do a reusable rocket, and that would create an extra value because the cost of launch becomes much lower. So they are the closest in terms of launch vehicle. Now, there are at least 2 or 3 other companies that are working on launch vehicles, but they are further apart. I cannot talk about a specific timeline by which they'll be ready, but I think Agnikul will definitely be ready about a year from now with their reusable launch vehicle.
You wouldn't want to name the other companies, would you? Whatever may be the timeline, that aside.
They are a little bit behind. They're a little bit behind. It's too early. Too early. Those names are not in public domain yet. But there are companies that are working on rockets much larger than small launch vehicles. In fact, there's a company that's working on a rocket that is even larger than the largest ISRO rocket today. And they probably are several years away from being able to successfully demonstrate their ability. So therefore, it's premature to talk about them.
Sure, that's quite fascinating. But Dr. Goenka, what about the bottlenecks? I mean, I'm sure there are some hurdles, maybe regulatory approvals. Is it now talent? And is there enough talent in the market? And is there a lot of poaching which happens as well with such specialized and niche talent?
So see, what we are talking mostly today so far is about launch vehicles. Launch vehicles is just one part of the overall space ecosystem that we are trying to create in the private sector. The launch vehicle part of the revenue would be only a small portion of the $44 billion. The larger revenue will come from the satellite, the payloads, the data dissemination, the applications, and so on, right? So therefore, if you look at the companies, and we talk about 400 plus startups in India, out of 400 plus startups, only about 10 or 15 are doing something to do with launch vehicle. Most of the other startups are working on these other things, the startups, satellites and stuff like that. And many satellites have been successfully launched. We have had at least 5 companies that have successfully launched their satellites, which are in orbit. Some of them, 1 or 2 have failed. 5 or 6 are in orbit today. There are companies that are working on very aggressive, ambitious projects on satellites, communication satellite, remote sensing satellites. There are companies that are doing tremendous amount of work in application. So all of these things are sort of coming together. We have to create the ecosystem, we have to create the infrastructure, we have to do the skilling, we have to fix the regulations, we have to ensure that we don't create bottlenecks, we have to open up the borders, we have to allow entry into some sensitive things where we have to be careful about security. All this has to happen together. There's not one thing, one button, one lever that we can pull and say we are done. A specific question on regulation. It's an evolving thing. We started with Indian space policy in 2023. Then we came out with the norms, guideline, and procedures for giving authorizations. And as we move forward, we keep sort of fine-tuning it and try and make sure that it does not become by itself a burden on the industry. At the same time, space is a dual-use technology, and we have to be very careful that while we are making it easier for the private sector to come in, we do not do anything that compromises with national security. And that's something that is non-negotiable. So we have to balance the two, but we take inputs from private sector all along, from everything that we are doing. And I think you should ask the companies, but I think we have a reasonably smooth system already defined, put in place, where I don't think there's too much of a concern that private sector has. In fact, Pavan Chandana, in one of his speeches, did say that he had zero delay in getting approvals. So I hope that was something that everybody understands and believes, that we have a good regulatory system which keeps the check on what we should check, but unnecessarily does not put in hurdles into moving forward.
Interesting. So 5 years from now, Dr. Goenka, what does India's space sector look like if this momentum holds? And what's the one thing that could perhaps derail it?
So 5 years from now, we should have few clear measures, okay, which may be sort of proxy to advancement of the sector. Okay, I say proxy too because these are things that we can measure, which imply things are happening. So number one, I said earlier when you asked me the question, to have 5 unicorns in the space sector by 2030, which is a good measure that Skyroot was not a one-off kind of thing. It is something that is the first one to happen of many that are coming behind. That's number one. Number two, to have 50 launches in a year by 2030. Okay, that's again a target that our Honorable Prime Minister has given. Now, 50 may sound like an impossible target 5 years from now, because we had done only 4 or 5 or 6 in the last several years every year. But if you look at this, we have Skyroot, we have Agnikul, we have HL. These three will have their vehicles fully up and running. And between the three, even if they do one a month, and they have to, that's 36, right? Beyond that, we will have all the ISRO launches with PSLV, with LVM-3, and that will add another 15 or so. So 50 launches per year from combination of SHAR and the new launch center in Kulsakapatnam would be another measure that we have arrived, okay? Now, the reason it's a measure of arrival is not the number 50, but to make 50 launches, we have to have payloads for 50 launches. To have the payload for 50 launches, that means we are creating satellites, 150, 200, 250 satellites getting launched from India every year. Many of them will get manufactured in India. That means we will have an overall ecosystem and companies that are able to manufacture these satellites. These satellites will then be transmitting data. Then we'll have to have a ground station infrastructure to receive data. The data has to be used. Then we will have application programs that will be written to use that data. And then there'll be people who will be using the application program. So in a sense, what I'm trying to describe to you is if we are able to get to 50 launches, that means the whole ecosystem is functional. And a good measure then out of all of this will be what's the size of space economy, how many people are employed in space outside ISRO. For all of those, we have a number right now, but the two that I want you to let your audience keep an eye on is 5 unicorns, 50 launches.
Okay, and the great multiplier effect that all of it is going to bring. Dr. Goenka, thank you so much for your time today. Great speaking with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.